Good evening. I'm Alina Weisskopf filling in for Steve Lance tonight. A TikTok ban is looking imminent. A federal appeals court today upheld a law requiring the sale or ban of TikTok in the U.S.
TikTok's Chinese parent company ByteDance on Friday lost its bid to block a U.S. law that's set to ban the platform by January 19, 2025, unless the company agrees to sell TikTok to a U.S. buyer. The law in question, called Protecting Americans from Foreign Adversary-Controlled Applications Act, identifies China and 3 other countries as foreign adversaries of the U.S. It prohibits their social media apps from being distributed in the country. TikTok and ByteDance argued that the law is unconstitutional and violates free speech rights, saying it had been singled out under false pretenses because data collection was not the government's real concern. The Justice Department said the app poses a serious threat to national security as it has access to the personal data of a large number of Americans and because Beijing can covertly manipulate the information Americans consume through TikTok. Senior Circuit Judge Douglas Ginsburg, writing the opinion for the 3-judge panel, said the parts of the law that were being challenged did not violate the First Amendment because there was a compelling government interest in blocking China from manipulating personal data rather than a desire to interfere with speech. However, Ginsburg wrote that potential content manipulation by the Chinese regime could infringe on Americans' First Amendment rights. The panel was persuaded that the Chinese Communist regime presented a national security threat, citing high-profile cases of Chinese state-backed cyber attack and cyber espionage campaigns. In a statement, TikTok indicated it would appeal the decision. Company spokesperson Michael Hughes said, quote, "The Supreme Court has an established historical record of protecting Americans' right to free speech, and we expect they will do just that on this important constitutional issue." He said the pending ban on TikTok will result in outright censorship of the American people. In a statement for the Justice Department, Attorney General Merrick Garland said, "Today's decision is an important step in blocking the Chinese government from weaponizing TikTok to collect sensitive information about millions of Americans and to undermine our national security." He added that the Justice Department was committed to protecting Americans' sensitive data from authoritarian regimes.
And at the first press conference at the White House after President Biden announced a sweeping pardon for his son, the press secretary is defending Biden's decision amid speculation that he will issue more pardons in the coming weeks. NTD's White House correspondent Iris Tao has more.
This was not easy for the president. It wasn't.
The White House on Friday seeking to defend President Biden's decision to issue a blanket pardon for his son Hunter Biden, despite having previously promised that he wouldn't do so. Asked about what changed his mind, the press secretary stressed that Biden wrestled with the decision and was influenced by several factors.
Republicans not letting up, saying they won't stop. They're going to continue to do this. Trump appointees of legal enforcement positions, right, that said during the campaign they would have, they were out for retribution. There was a sentencing coming up, as you all know.
That was well known.
I said there are multiple factors here, not one thing.
Karine Jean-Pierre also referred to Biden's Sunday statement announcing the pardon, in which he called his son's treatment a miscarriage of justice and pointed to political motivation behind his son's tax and gun charges. The White House's defense comes as Biden is expected to issue more pardons in the final weeks of his administration. The press secretary noting Biden's record of pardoning those with nonviolent drug offenses and marijuana convictions. But in addition to more conventional pardons, like for those convicted of federal crimes, the Associated Press is reporting that Biden is also considering issuing preemptive pardons for allies and officials, such as Dr. Anthony Fauci, who could face legal actions and probes in the incoming Trump administration. The White House, while declining to confirm any details, knows that it has been hearing from advocates lobbying for pardons and clemencies.
We've heard from them. You all have seen it. So obviously we've heard them. I'm just not going to get into specifics of what we're going to do, not do.
The White House also announced that President Biden would give a speech next Tuesday to talk about what the White House calls his economic record and legacy. Reporting by Iris Tao, NTD News.
And Vice President-elect J.D. Vance is in North Carolina speaking to residents that are still recovering from the deadly Hurricane Helene. NTD's Jack Bradley joins us live now from Palm Beach outside of Trump's Mar-a-Lago residence. Jack, what's Vance's message to the hurricane victims and first responders?
Good evening, Melina. Well, he said that the Trump administration will do more when they take office. As far as the hurricane victims of Helene, they've had difficulty communicating due to the hurricane and the damaged infrastructure resulting from that. And Vance said that they'll make this a major focus when they take office. Take a look.
We have really got to do a better job when it comes to communications infrastructure in this country. It is frankly a disgrace, given that we have Starlink, given that we have access to modern technology. One of the things that we're going to focus on in the next administration is to make sure that our communications infrastructure is in a place that if, God forbid, another area like this is affected by the storm, at least we have the communication in place to minimize the damage and to allow people to communicate with the people that they love.
Now, Melina, this comes about a month after Trump visited North Carolina, the hurricane-stricken regions, on the campaign trail and criticizing the Federal Emergency Management Agency, or FEMA. Now, the FEMA administrator said that the agency is almost out of money, won't be able to respond to any future natural disasters of that magnitude like Hurricane Milton and Helene because of those recent hurricanes. President Biden came out recently asking Congress to pass a $100 billion package that would fund FEMA. Now, FEMA has been criticized for having a program that houses illegal immigrants, especially by congressional Republicans, but officials in FEMA say that none of the funds going into that program are coming from disaster relief. And just tonight, President Biden made available more funding for FEMA and this hurricane-stricken regions to complete debris removal tasks. Melina?
Right, Jack, thank you for all of those updates. And of course, we're still awaiting that action from Congress to pass that supplemental aid package to deal with those hurricanes. So we'll be watching and keep an eye on that. You're also covering President-elect Trump and everything that he's doing right now. Now, you're saying that his nominee, Pete Hegseth, has a lot of support. That's what Trump is saying, and you're doing reporting on that. But Jack, is it enough support for him to ultimately win that nomination?
It appears that he's getting enough support, at least from the Republicans that are coming out and speaking about him, with the exception of Senator Joni Ernst, who's, after meeting with Hegseth, has not indicated either way whether she'll vote for him or not. Now, the Republicans, the nominees that Trump nominated, do have an advantage in the next Senate with a 53-47 majority there. But as far as President-elect Donald Trump, he came out on Truth Social this morning saying that Hegseth is doing very well and that he has the support that he needs, and it's strong and deep. Senator J.D. Vance, when asked about this in North Carolina, also echoed those comments and said that he believes that he will get through this nomination process. Take a look.
I fully support Pete. I think Pete's going to get confirmed, and we are completely behind him. I have talked to Joni. I've talked to a number of my colleagues about this nomination and about other nominations. All I'm asking is that people actually allow the Senate process to work. We do not determine.
Now, this comes right after Trump was apparently considering alternatives, or reports of which, to the Hegseth nomination. Our sister media, the Epoch Times, has confirmed that someone familiar with the Trump transition has said that Trump was considering even Florida Governor Ron DeSantis for that position. This comes as Hegseth is facing allegations of sexual misconduct as well as excessive drinking, all of which he has denied. Melina.
All right, thank you so much for those useful updates, Jack. I want to switch gears and talk about another one of Trump's nominees. Today, the National Police Association endorsed Trump's pick for the FBI Director, Kash Patel. What did they say about how Patel would ultimately lead the nation's law enforcement agency?
Two things: transparency and accountability, looking at his previous record. Now, this is a very big endorsement here. The Police Association oversees about 240,000 police officers across the U.S. And as far as this endorsement, Kash Patel, others are echoing this too. Like J.D. Vance, he also said today that Patel is in a very good spot for his nomination. Patel's a former Pentagon chief of staff, and we know that he wants to make dramatic changes to the FBI, like changes including these surveillance systems that surveil U.S. citizens. And in order for Patel to take office, to take that position, he would need to pass the nomination process, of course, but also a current FBI director, Christopher Wray, would need to step down, or he would have to be moved out of the way by the Trump administration. Melina.
All right. Thank you so much for all of those thorough updates late this evening, Jack. We really appreciate you. And the leader of South Korea's ruling party is supporting the impeachment of President Yoon Suk-yeol over a now retracted declaration of martial law. The Andrew Yeo, a senior fellow and Korea chair at the Brookings Institution and politics professor at Catholic University, unpacks the pressing questions for South Korea's political future with NTD's Steve Lance. Take a look.
Andrew Yeo, thank you so much for joining.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Andrew, South Korean opposition lawmakers plan to vote this weekend on impeaching President Yoon, this for his attempt to impose martial law. Meanwhile, police are investigating several top ministers in South Korea. What do you anticipate overall for this region right now?
Yeah, it's been a roller coaster ride following South Korean politics with the declaration of martial law walking down, and now the South Korean president is about to be impeached. Up until yesterday, it looked like President Yoon's own party, the People Power Party, were going to support him, but now the party leader, Han Dong-hoon, says that he's going to vote for impeachment. So he needs at least 8 people in his party to defect to vote with the opposition to have President Yoon Suk-yeol impeached. And of course, it doesn't mean that South Korea's out of the woods yet then, because they would be without a leadership and there'd be a caretaker government under the prime minister.
Really fascinating. I mean, do you have any inkling as to how this might play out? And of course, President Yoon said that the opposition was paralyzing, quote unquote, judicial operations, and accused some opposition members of sympathizing with North Korea. And if indeed that is the case or not, how or what methods does South Korea have in place to investigate such allegations?
Yeah, well, there's some claims to truth in what President Yoon is saying in terms of the obstruction and the opposition. They've given him a really difficult time to really move governance forward in his country. In terms of the claims about North Korea, I think when he says anti-state forces that or pro-North Korea forces, I don't think there's any I haven't seen any direct evidence that North Koreans have somehow steered opposition leaders or opposition members to protest or sideline President Yoon and his political agenda. But yes, the opposition, many members take on more of a pro-engagement stance towards North Korea, which is very different from President Yoon, who's taking a much more hawkish hardline approach.
Now, South Korea has maintained a relatively stable government since democracy was restored in 1988. I say that, I highlight the relatively part. There have been quite a few impeachments and other, I don't know if you'd call them scandals at the top levels of government in South Korea, but relatively stable. How concerning are these developments, or should they be, for the United States?
Sure. So you're right. South Korea has had its fair share of drama and political turmoil, but for the most part, since democratization in the late 80s, the governments have been stable. And this is the first time that martial law was declared in 40 years. So you're right that in some ways this is it's not good news for South Korea. They had another impeachment process 8 years ago when they impeached President Park Geun-hye. So on one hand, I still think South Korean democracy is functioning, the institutions are functioning, elections are free and fair. But it is a bit troubling when what we're seeing is extreme polarization. We're seeing both the progressives and conservatives, they're not able to work together. It's either my way or the highway. And of course, this lack of forbearance, the lack of civility and tolerance, that has been eating away at South Korean democracy.
Now, President Yoon does have supporters in his country that have come out in protest of this situation against the president there in his support. A lot of folks watching outside, they say that, he's vowing a tougher stance against North Korea and China. If indeed he is removed, will other leaders address these concerns?
Yeah, so that's some of the concerns that people have who are worried about East Asian security, about competition with China, or China's growing influence, and assertiveness, aggression within the region. So, South Korea generally tends to be a bit more cautious than other U.S. allies, but President Yoon has been more forthcoming in calling out China for various human rights abuses. On South China Sea disputes, he mentions that those are of concern, and he's slowly inched his way in terms of the rhetoric when it comes to Taiwan. The South Korean president has said that Taiwan is of importance to South Korea's national security. But the opposition leader right now, Lee Jae-myung, during the parliamentary elections in April, he was saying things like, we should just tell China, thanks but no thanks when it comes to the Taiwan issue, that South Korea shouldn't be engaged on issues like the Ukraine war. And so there are some concerns with the opposition of what their foreign policy will look like, not just for the region, but globally. Whereas President Yoon has talked a lot about South Korea becoming a global pivotal state, being much more engaged strategically in the Indo-Pacific, but elsewhere. And another key difference, of course, is the approach to North Korea. The opposition don't really have a good response to any of this because their default position is to try to seek engagement and cooperation with North Korea. And I don't know how that necessarily is possible when the North Koreans are now saying they don't even want unification with South Korea.
Really important part of the world and a very important U.S. ally with tens of thousands of U.S. troops placed there. So we'll be keeping a close eye on this. Andrew Yeo, really appreciate your insights.
Thanks, Steve, for having me here.
Thank you for watching the Capitol Report. If you want to see our full broadcast, check us out at epochtv.com.